Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm Daniel Chavez Jr. Tonight, we got a very special guest, and here's a little information about him before we introduce him. A lifelong resident of the city of Oxnard, him and his wife had raised three boys here. Two of them are both in the military, so we thank them for their service. For 43 years, Mr. Villa has been volunteering in the community anywhere from youth, schools, and even in our very own neighborhoods. During that time, for 34 years, he had worked in the U.S. Postal Service and retired. After his entire time, he has served on multiple oversight committees, citizen advisory groups on both the city of Oxnard and as well as the county. He currently chairs the INCO, which is the Inter-Neighborhood Organization Council, as well as the chair of the Hobson Park East. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Jack Villa. Jack?
Hello, Daniel. Can you hear me
Hey,
now?
Jack. I can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Daniel, for allowing me to be interviewed and getting people to know who I am. So thanks.
Well, thank you. So it's actually two big thanks you. One, thank you for doing your work as a U.S. Postal Service worker for 34 years. You know, we all like getting our mails, especially when it comes to our refund for our taxes. Um, and then thank you to your family for your two sons who are both servicemen. So we thank you and your family for that. I'm sure it's difficult when they get deployed and you know they're very hard on the family, so thank
Yes.
you for that.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. We, like you said, this is an opportunity for the public to get to know who exactly Jack Villa is. You know, just that short little bio, you know, you volunteered in Oxnard for 43 years, you know, anywhere from the schools, which I'm assuming it was during the time when your sons were in
Yes.
school,
Correct.
you neighborhoods, and you're still part of the neighborhoods. Even now, you chair your neighborhood, and you're still part of the INCO, which is the Inter-Neighborhood Organization Council. So, what motivated you to run for office? Because it sounds like you already have a pretty full plate.
Yes, I do. You know, when I started volunteering, I was 20 years old, and then actually it was my younger brother who was 18 at the time, and he was just dying. He had to be 18 to coach Little League, and so he goes, Jack, let's go out and coach a baseball team in the neighborhood. And I'm thinking, oh shoot, I was going to school at the time, and I just says, okay, let's do it. And so after that, it just kept on, you know, working with youth in Little League. And then when I had my kids, I stuck with them as far as working with youth. And then when they were in school, I worked with after school programs and PTAs. And so it kind of grew from that. Since I was 20 years old, I had never stopped. Actually. And then when I had my career at the Postal Service, I volunteered, you know, as a steward and an e-board, and eventually became the president of the local. So I'm one of those people that, you know, when you get into a meeting and they ask for volunteers and no one raised their hand, and I'm usually the one that raises their hand. And so it's just been, you know, one year after another, I'm just volunteering for everything. And so, but like I said, you know, I served on the Ventura County Grand Jury, was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was just 1 year. And do you get to know people from different professions and different backgrounds, and they live in different parts of the county, and they have different viewpoints. And when I was in the grand jury, you know, you come about complaints, and everyone had a view of the complaints that were submitted, and all through the investigations and stuff. And so you learn quite a bit, not just of the issue, but of people as well. And I thought that was just probably the greatest experience that I've had. And so I recommend that, if you can do it, that's probably one of the ultimate volunteering position is this Ventura County Grand Jury. But it takes a lot of your time, and you have a lot of dedication to that being a grand jury. So yeah, and so after all this volunteering, this is the second time I've run, and my natural instincts was to continue my volunteering and to serve the public. And that's what my interest is just to serve the residents in any capacity I can. And so I think my opportunity to run for council gives me that ability to serve the public. And that's my primary goal, is to serve the public. And I think I have such a long background and diverse background of volunteering for different issues and different things that are happening in the city. And so whether it's schools or youth or the arts, neighborhoods, the workplace, I just volunteer. And that's, that's just my makeup of volunteering. I kind of was raised that way, My parents didn't like for us to sit on the couch and watch TV unless it was a Dodger game. And so, I couldn't stand around with my hands in my pocket, or they'd put me to work. And so, that's just the way I was raised, to contribute and always, not just go to school, but do more, not just go to work, but do more. And then, and so, so I kind of enjoyed it, meeting people and getting engaged and listening to people in the community. So it's been a long haul, and I probably will continue even after this election. So you'll see me or hear of me one way or another. I will be active.
Now, you mentioned that this is your second time running for council, and it sounded like you didn't disappear. Oxnard has kind of a history where candidates run for office and then they kind of just vanish, and you never see them again until the next election. You didn't do that. You actually stuck around and still continued your efforts on the INCO. Can you touch a little bit about the INCO and what efforts you have done between the 2016 election and this?
Right. My work with the INCO is working with the neighborhoods, and there's 48 neighborhoods in the city of Oxnard, and there's when I started, there was probably about 27 that were active. And I said to myself, there's only 27, and there's got to be more participation in order for this to work and for this organization to carry weight. And so I went about trying to activate neighborhoods that were not active. And I could name quite a few of them where I participated in getting those neighborhoods active and participating in the city's decision-making. And that brought a lot of joy, because I was trying to get the whole city inclusive, and not just for the issues of my neighborhood, but I know there's other neighborhoods out there that want representation, and they want their voices heard. And I believe that's their right to be heard. And without a neighborhood council, there's no springboard in which for neighborhoods to be heard. And there's a lot of issues out there in neighborhoods, even though they're all different in some aspect, but they all should be heard. And I hope the INCO is a platform in which all these neighborhoods could be heard.
Great. So this would be the next part where I ask you what has prepared you to be the right choice for city council. But you pretty much touched on it. You know, you have been actively engaged with the city for a number of years,
Right.
and with the INCO. How long have you actually been with the neighborhood council component of it?
Well, it's like a little bit like the grand jury. Every neighborhood is a little different, and everybody has their view on how best the city's problems can be addressed. And I think me being there allowed me to hear some of those views that might not particularly I agree with, but it gives me a view of all the views that are out there in the city, and there's quite a few of them. And as council person, I believe I can go out to every neighborhood, not just the 4th district, and listen to those neighborhoods' concerns. And I was very active, not just in the 4th district, but neighborhoods all over the city. I mean, to South Winds, all the way to River Park, from Channel Islands, all the way to East Village, downtown. I mean, there was quite a few neighborhoods that I even attended for just to listen to their concerns and where they were at as far as some of their problems. And so I believe I have the makeup of listening and speaking with neighborhoods and kind of digesting all their problems. And I'm not saying I'll have the answer to these problems, but I think an open ear and being able to listen to the neighborhoods and actively listen to them and kind of digest all the information from the neighborhoods, residents, to businesses, staff, and the rest of the council too. You got to be able to digest all that information and come up with a decision on which direction to go on any particular issue. So
Well, now you touched on the fact that you've attended multiple city neighborhood councils. You know, when you first started, it was only 27. Now there's 48. So
well, there's 48 total, but during our I don't want to take all the credit. There was other chairs that helped me recruit some of these neighborhoods. So now it's about 35 neighborhoods. Some have stopped for several reasons, but it's growing, and I want it to continue to grow. So it's about 35 neighborhoods out of the 48 now. And so I'm more happier with a larger group than it was before when I first started.
yeah, and I didn't mean to make it seem like you were the only one doing it, but
No, there was other help. I had help.
so let me ask you, now that the fact that you know where the needs, the wants, the concerns of these 35 neighborhoods, what are now your top 3 priorities moving into trying to get onto a seat on the city council? And I know there could be hundreds of issues. I know, you know, as me, I was a former candidate. I know that there are hundreds of issues, but I also know it's very difficult to try to narrow it down to just 3. But what are your top 3 priorities after hearing from 35 neighborhoods and residents throughout the city through normal events before COVID and even now?
Well, first and foremost, a council person's duty is to, well, any elected official is to guarantee that safety and health in the city is, that's your priority, the health and safety of the city. So I know police and fire is probably a big priority for residents. At the same time, they're concerned about the homeless issue, but in this, not to make things difficult, but also the vagrancy issue. And that part is where neighborhoods are very frustrated with. You know, they have a compassion for those who are homeless and don't have a place to sleep, but there's also that frustration of vagrancy, individuals that do everything from petty crime to urinating in the parks, and just that is a big concern of the neighborhoods. And also, I believe the transparency and the city being physically responsible as far as our tax money. And those three are probably the top three. But I mean, there's, like you said, there's thousands of issues. Everything from cleaning streets to having more parking space in front of their home, or just being able to walk their dog down the street, and crosswalks for kids going to school. I mean, there's 1,000 of them issues out there, and some neighborhoods are have it worse than others on certain issues.
So I want to ask you, in particularly your first one about safety and health as your first priority, and you mentioned public safety, that's police and fire. In a post that you posted on Facebook, you talked about how county officials and city council, they actually need to step up and be better leaders and really focus more on, I want to get this correct, by real change in policy and procedures, training, hiring, discipline, and longer probation for employees, and oversight and transparency. You also believe that there should be an oversight committee to, and I'm assuming to the police and fire departments, right?
Right.
Now, how do you see that working out when right now it's popular to say defund the police? You have New York, you have other cities that are cutting the budgets of their police departments. So I guess ultimately, where do you stand on that same issue? Because there has been some calls here in Oxnard from residents to also defund our police department. So how does that work out for you?
Thank you, Daniel. That's a good question. I am not for defunding the police department. I'm not defunding. I know there's residents that are concerned about the money they make and their pensions. I believe they have a tough job, and I believe they deserve that money. They deserve the pension. My two sons are in the military. I wish they got paid that much. They got a tough job, and so as far as the pay, the staffing, the equipment they use, up-to-date equipment, I want the best for them. They have a very tough job. At the same time, if you're going to get all this pay, all the best equipment, there should be an oversight. If I got paid $150,000, I wouldn't mind people looking over my shoulder to see that I did my job correctly. The city has policies and procedures for police and fire, and and I think those policies and procedures need to be changed. And actually, this is for the whole country. I'm also talking about the whole country. And those policies and procedures should be changed, decided upon the community. So each community is different. And so they should all have a voice in how change of the police department and fire are to operate. And they should, I think they should have input. And right now, I can tell you right now that Lexipol, it's a company, I don't know if you've heard of Lexipol, And what they do is they write policies and procedures for about 80% of the police forces in the country. I believe they're the writers and police procedures for all the cities in Ventura County and the sheriffs. If I'm not, someone let me know if I'm wrong on that. But I'm pretty sure they're the ones, the authors of the policies and procedures. And there are certain things in those policies and procedures, like, for example, lawsuits to any particular officer, that you can't sue an officer for liability. I believe you cannot, some cities you cannot even have an oversight committee. There's no review of any complaints within the city. A resident can't come in. I want to see all the complaints in the city. I don't believe, someone correct me again if I'm wrong, but you can't go into this police department and say, I want to see all the complaints in the last year.
I honestly, Jack, I do believe you can. I think there are select complaints that residents can go and view. And again, I'll double check that and I'll get back to you. And
oh, yes, get back to me. Get back to me if I'm mistaken on that. But there's certain aspects inside the policies and procedures where transparency and oversight is hampered. And I don't want to say that the police are bad people. I believe 99.5% are very good police officers, very good people. They mean well, they want to do their profession correctly. And then there's another percentage of officers that might not be trained correctly. They come across different scenarios, whether it's abuse in the family, whether it's someone on drugs, whether it's marital conflict, where there's a homeless who has mental issues. And the training of these officers, I want to, as a citizen, I would like to be ensured that all the officers got the most amount of training that they can get. And I think an oversight committee would satisfy the residents as far as the safety of the police. And when you were talking about, I was working for the Postal Service, I believe there's a survey that said, you know, the 91% of the public likes or is in favor of how the police or the Postal Service operates, which is very high. And then I just saw another survey about the police, and I think it was on either Bloomberg or Washington Post, one of those, where the police was favorability is about 50%. That's national. That's not the city. I'm sure it's higher in the city of Oxnard, but I would like to strive for 100. I don't want to, you know, and I know there's residents out there, certain neighborhoods where there's no trust. And I want to build that trust because they have a tough job and I don't want to hamper police at all. And I believe an oversight committee could bring back some of that trust into the community. And I want to strive for 100%. And communities cannot continue the same path and expect the same, different results. And so something has to change. And I believe changing and policies and procedures and allowing oversight committee can bring about that change, positive change. So that's where I stand at. But as far as the police, I'm not against their pay or pensions. They have a tough job.
So let me ask you, Jack, you talked about transparency. Now, you've been in the city for a number of years and you've seen the current chief, Chief Whitney. You've seen the former police chief, Chief Jerry Williams, and then you also seen the former chief before her. His name is slipping my mind. John.
Hurt.
I'm sorry.
John Hurt. Yeah.
Cambridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So me personally, I'm only 31. I've really seen the difference between our former police chief of Jerry Williams and our current police chief of Scott Whitney. And I feel like there's a lot more transparency in the terms that there's more communication with the public. Now, you stated that should be more transparency and that an oversight committee will do that. What is exactly that you're not seeing that you believe residents should be seeing?
That's a good question. I agree with you. There's a lot more communication. The police are out there as a neighborhood council chair. They go to all the meetings. I mean, they do a really good job in being there to answer questions to the public. I mean, outstanding job. And they're there as far as communicating. But at the same time, there's issues like, for example, cameras on police officers. As you and I, as residents, do we have access to the cameras or the filming of these officers? Do we have access to the officers do not turn on their cameras? Are there officers that get disciplined for not having their camera on? There's questions like that we're in the dark.
Jack, I'm just gonna interrupt you on that point because I do have knowledge because I went through the Oxnard Chamber of Commerce Leadership Academy, and one of those sessions was to meet at the Public Safety Day, and we did meet with Oxnard PD, and they do have policies in place and disciplinary policies when officers don't turn on their cameras at appropriate times. Right. It is also their policy that anytime that they make contact with somebody, that they have to activate their cameras. So there are policies and procedures in place. And I'm not saying that I'm speaking on behalf of the police department, but I'm just saying from my knowledge, there are those policies already in place as far as that they need to turn on their cameras when they make contact with any member of the public.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I believe that's true. But what I'm talking about is giving confidence to that smaller percentage of people that don't have confidence in the police. I believe if you have transparency, that segment of the population that don't trust the police have some place where they can hold on to believe in the police. You and I might sit here and say, oh, I believe in the police, and that's fine. But there's a certain segment of the population, and I go from neighborhood to neighborhood, and I know there's a segment that is not happy with the procedures of the police. And I want to give also them the comfort that the police are doing the right thing. So it's not a committee to say, got you. It's a committee to bring faith to those who don't have faith. And that's what I believe the police departments all across the country, actually, they're under attack, all right? And I believe, what you say is I believe what you say, but there's that segment of the population that needs that faith. And I believe an oversight committee can open the eyes to a lot of people that don't have that faith. And that's what I want. I want to improve that favorability rate to the police. You and I have that favorability, but there's a large population that don't have that.
No, and I completely agree with you. There are portions of our city that do not trust the police for whatever experience that they may have had with the
Right.
police prior. And you know as well as I know, we have gone throughout the entire city. We've spoken with residents from all over the place. But let me ask you something, because this November, the residents are going to be seeing a Measure E on the ballot, which is a sales tax increase that the city put on. Now, I agree with everything you're talking about in regards for more training, more hiring for our police. I agree with that. And I will also go on the limb and say that police departments across the nation will also agree with you that there should be more training, there should be more hiring. But to just center and bring it back to focus to the city of Oxnard, we have had decades of mismanagement. And the reality is that it all starts at the top. And when I mean the top, I mean the city council. The city council gives directions to the city manager, and the city manager's duty is to carry that direction out. You also posted on Facebook that you're not in support of Measure E, which is the sales tax increase. And in fact, you were actually challenged by the city on a couple of measures that you co-signed on that
Yes.
are authored by Mr. Starr. So how do you propose that an oversight committee, hiring, training, equipment, the best equipment, how do you propose all of that get met when we are in the same boat like many cities because of COVID, that revenue has just gone completely down. There's no sales taxes because people aren't shopping as much. They're not going out and eating as much. They're slowly starting to build up, but it's not on that same level. And in the most recent budget from the city, it was proposed that a fire station in South Oxnard was to be eliminated. The city, the police department eliminated 17 positions from their list, which means those are gone. You know, they're not vacant, they're gone. So how do you propose that the city meets these, I don't want to say fantasies, but these ideas of yours to have the hiring, to have the training, to have the discipline, the oversight, when there's no real revenue coming in, and Measure O is doing its best to try to cover everything. And unfortunately, there's just not enough money to go around.
Thank you, Daniel, for asking me that question. That's a good question. And the answer is that I am against Measure E, but I am not against the idea of a tax increase. I am for a tax increase. I realize that we need the revenue, but in the way the initiative is written, there is no end date and there's no specifics of how that money is going to be spent. Now, I am running on transparency. Now, if you're going to put an initiative to put into the general fund, there's no way of knowing where that money's going to go. What we have is we've lost the Carnegie Museum. We've lost the Children's Museum. We're hanging by a thread at the Performing Arts. They almost got rid of the Colonia Gym, the Colonia Library. There should be more money put into city core and for youth services and for senior services. I would like to see all that be supplemented with the new tax, but there's nothing in the language to ensure the public that all those services would come back and that everything would be restored, that our parks would be, the grass would be cut and watered. There's nothing in the initiative that gives, again, the residents the feeling that our city is going to be a city. Right now, the COVID has kind of exposed our frail budget, and with seeing weeds growing over, you have residents cutting the weeds in neighborhoods. I mean, that's not a city. If you, I mean, we're paying all these taxes, And I don't mind the tax increase, but we don't know where money's going to go. The city manager might say, well, I'm going to put those money towards those items, let's say, but there's no guarantee that city manager will be there in 5 years. There's no guarantee what the makeup will be on the city council. So that's why I would like to see an end date to this Measure E, and there isn't one. And I can't believe, I mean, when you raise a tax, it only hurts the poor. I mean, they're hanging by threads. They're making the decision, should I go see the doctor and pay that $25 deductible, or should I put gas in the car to go to work? That's the kind of decisions a lot of families are having. And to supplement their budgets at home, they'll probably take in another person in their house, rent a room, have more yard sales to make ends meet. People are on thin ice. And if you're going to ask for $40 million every year for the rest of their life, they should know where that money's going to go. And that's where my problem lies. It's not with the tax, it's with it's with the transparency of where that money's going to go. There's no guarantee that I like some of the ideas that the city manager has, but you gotta be more responsible. And I don't think there's no guarantee that he'll be here for the rest of his career. And like I said, the council, there's no guarantee of what kind of council we'll have in the future. That's why I would rather see an end date to that tax. So I am in favor of the tax. It's just not written correctly, and I don't want to put those poor families stress any more than they already have. And I'm kind of disappointed that the vote for the initiative went 7-0, and no one spoke up for those low-income families that are going to be struggling for it. I mean, they won't have that extra money to put in a retirement fund. They won't have that money to see a doctor, for medication. Everything's going to get a lot tighter for them. And I will be okay. I will be okay. I'm sure you'll probably be okay too, but there's those families, they're in trouble. And I don't think the city was responsible in putting that initiative up the way it was put up. That's why I'm against that.
Well, Jack, me for the past 5 years, I've advocated for the low-income families of South Oxnard, because that's where I grew up. I grew up in South Oxnard. I still live in South Oxnard, and I'm in the District 4, but yeah. I'm on the other side of the railroad tracks. I'm on the south side. So I completely understand what you're saying about how it's a burdensome on the low to very low income families, because that has been my issue with our city for the past 5 years, was that they create policies that do burden those low income to extremely low income families. Even when they were doing the water rates, I wanted them to take more of an approach that was not so harsh. Yes, I admit I was against Measure M passing, even though it did pass, and it overturned the rates that the council initially put in, and then the council came back with new rates. Those new rates I still wasn't happy with, but I knew that those rates had to go into place in order to deal with infrastructure for the wastewater. But at the same time, there were residents saying $1 or more is not a big deal. Don't eat a pizza, don't go out to the movies. But at the same time, my analogies was a gallon of milk that costs around $3-4 right now versus paying my utility bill. Do I feed my family tonight? Do I not feed my family tonight? So that's the concern. So I see what you're saying, but at the same time, circling back to my original question, how do you propose to meet all of these views and goals that you have when our city, and you said it kind of, COVID kind of exposed the city that we can't meet certain obligations, that we have residents going out, cutting medians, trimming trees, cutting bushes, raking leaves, doing all these things that's outside of their purview. Residents should not be maintaining their own city that way. That's the city's job. So again, how do you propose to meet these goals of yours when you're not in favor of the sales tax because it's not specific? And just a clarification to those that are watching, a general tax is a tax that can be used for anything, whether, it could pay for a position, it could pay for positions from the police department, it could pay a bond, whatever it may be. A special tax, a specific tax, has listed categories as to where that money is supposed to go. So I just wanted to make that clarification. So go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, like I said, I don't mind the tax increase, but I would like to see an end date to it. This tax was to help get us out of this hole we're in. And I don't mind a tax, if it was for 7-10 years, and then you come back to the voters. If you need to continue, then you bring it to the voters again. And I just think a tax that goes on forever, and the only way you can do it is if there's a movement to have a measure put on the ballot. I don't think it should be done that way. I just really think that they should have put a time limit on the tax, 1.5%. I mean, we need it. I agree with that. But if it goes down, I hope they re-look at it and put it up, the tax initiative, in a way where it's more responsible, where the public knows where that money's going to go, and also an end date. When they first brought up the idea of a 1.5, I was for it because we do need the money. That's not the argument here with me. It's just I would rather see an end date and just enough to get us out of this hole we're in. And but that's where I stand.
So there's also people saying that Oxnard already pays the highest sales tax in the county, which is actually not true. We actually come in third when it comes to the sales tax. We're actually tied in third with the city of Ventura. The one that actually has the highest sales tax in the county is actually little old Port Hueneme. They're at like 8.75%. And then followed by Santa Paula, which is at 8.25, and then Oxnard and Ventura is at 7.75%. What do you tell people that believe that our taxes are too high? We are the largest city in Ventura County. We have 207,000 plus residents, and the census is this year. And I'm encouraging all residents to please participate in the census. That does help with funding for so many essential services throughout the city. So what do you say to those people that say we already pay so much?
Oxnard's a large city, and we cover a lot of ground. And and we need the staffing to cover, whether it's police, parks, street maintenance, and tax is the only way that we, as the city, can finance those services. But at the same time, the city's got to be a little bit more responsible on how they spend their money. and more transparent. That's all, just be transparent, just be about the money. And I don't think the city is as transparent as they should be. But that's my take.
So what would you tell residents? Because you talked about that the city needs to be, pretty much held accountable. And in the beginning, before we started talking about this, I said that it starts at the top. It starts with our elected officials, because they are the ones that ultimately approve whatever the budget is. It's proposed by the city manager. And what the city manager proposes, the city council is supposed to tear it apart,
Right.
keep some things, don't keep some things. So I guess ultimately I'm just trying to figure out, like, I get what you're saying, that you don't agree with the fact that the sales tax doesn't have an end date because there's no listed things, and the city manager is not always going to be there. And I agree with you, the city manager isn't always going to be there. But I believe it also takes the responsibility of our residents to step up and say, look, city council, you represent me. You're in that seat because I voted you in. This is what I want to see from my city. You still believe that the tax measure isn't necessary right now in its current language?
I believe that the tax is necessary. Yes, it's just I have a problem with the end date and the effect it has on low-income families. Even though if there was an end date, there's still going to be an impact on the low-income families, whether you have a tax or not. And no one likes taxes. But I think it gives the residents an assurance that, okay, this is just a temporary remedy until we get down to that end of the line, and hopefully the monies will be managed a lot better. And I think it just puts assurance and confidence into the city that the residents don't have now. I hear things that they're stealing it or things like that, and I don't want that perception to go out there that for the city. And I know I'm not accusing anybody of stealing any money or mismanaging, but they just have to be more transparent and engaged in the community. And that's where I come in as far as the being involved with the neighborhood councils. There was every year there's approximately 100 to 120 meetings throughout the city in the neighborhood councils. There's 7 council members. Each one could go to 3 neighborhood councils. And that's about 21 neighborhood councils that could, and so, I mean, they could be spread out and being engaged, and it's not happening. Well, now that's COVID, we don't have neighborhood meetings like we did before, but council's got to be engaged with the neighborhoods. That's where the residents are. And if you're going to have 120 meetings throughout the city, our representatives should be there just to go in and listen. And I don't think, well, some of the council members, I'll agree that are there. There's a few of them that attend neighborhood meetings pretty regularly, but there are certain ones that don't attend neighborhood meetings. And I think that's a good avenue. One of the avenues that council should participate. They're there looking for answers, and council should be there giving them answers.
So let me ask you, Jack, because and we're running down on time. This has been actually a really good conversation, and I'm going to have to ask you to come back again at a later date.
Oh yeah, no problem.
But you co-signed a measure that was authored by Mr. Starr, right, that ultimately overturns the vote of the voters in terms of Measure O.
Oh, yes.
Why do you support sunsetting Measure O before its end date and trying to put specifics on that tax, when that tax is a general tax. And like I mentioned before, general tax can be used for anything. And Measure O has been used in the last budget to save that fire department station that was slated to close, and saved a couple of other services and positions. So why would you support overturning the vote of residents and ending a measure that technically isn't specific of what that money's supposed to go to?
Another good question. Maybe we need another hour here.
I'm telling you, we need more time.
Yes, that's Measure N you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Measure O, when it was passed, it was written to that the streets and parks would be enhanced and maintained. That hasn't happened. And so what this will do is force the city to maintain them and enhance. Enhance is a very big word in that initiative. Enhance means to make better. And as you can see, it hasn't, they've been worse. Yeah. And so why would you have Measure O continue when it was sold to be an enhancement of the city? And it hasn't been. So what this does is tells the city, you enhance the city like you promised you did on the initiative, and you'll continue the Measure O. That's all. That's the basics of it, is just give us what we were promised on Measure O. That's all.
Okay. Biggest challenge from what I've heard from you during this conversation is transparency and accountability. That's what I'm hearing from you. That is Oxnard's challenge, is that they don't have enough transparency and that there's not enough accountability. Am I right on that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And you've already pretty much touched on the subject of how do you build more community involvement, and that's the neighborhood councils, to get those neighborhood councils that are not activated, get them activated, get them involved, get the community more involved.
Right.
Of course, right now with COVID, it's a little bit harder to be able to do that, but once I believe we're on a path of finding a solution. And I think it's going to most likely be similar to what we're doing right now on Zoom or some other type of platform, right, is what I'm hearing. So that builds that involvement. So let me just double check something. And again, I appreciate, and I do want to make mention that before Chief Jerry Williams, it was John Combrach, and I'm probably butchering.
Yes, that's right.
But again, I wish we had more time. I have a planning commission meeting tonight, so it can't go too much longer. But I feel like this is very important. This conversation that me and you are having is very important. And it is very good that we are touching on these issues. And but we're going to wrap it up. So this is your opportunity to go ahead and speak to the residents and let them know why you are the best choice to represent the 4th District on the council and to represent the city as a whole.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll wrap it up as fast as I can here. I've lived here a long time, and my family's been here a long time, and I most likely will retire here. And so my interest in having the Oxnard the best it can be is paramount. I want the city to be successful. And as council person, I have ideas, and I know you, Daniel, and other residents have other ideas. And I believe I have the ability to reach out to others throughout the city, whether it's the Fisherman's Wharf issue, whether it's issues in the Colonia or River Park. I've been available to all these neighborhoods. And if you look at my bio, I've never had a year where I didn't volunteer. There was never a year where I wasn't engaged with the public in one way or another. And that's what I plan to do as a council person. I'll be engaged with the schools. I'll be engaged with the businesses. I'll be engaged with the neighborhoods. I'll be engaged with staff. And I believe my background, if I would ask the voters to look at the backgrounds of all the candidates. And I think my background is more diverse. I've been at it longer. And I think I'm the right choice for this district in representing not only the district, but the rest of the city. And I know my opponents, they're very bright people. They have ideas too. And the election's gonna come down to who you want, who you feel is the best person to represent the district. And I ask the voters to look at the backgrounds. I can be vetted ever since I was in diapers. I've lived here all my life. You can talk to my fellow chairs in the INCO. You can talk to my fellow workers at the Postal Service. I mean, I could be vetted anyway, more than any other candidate. And I just ask you to give me the opportunity to serve. And that's what I plan to do, is serve the whole city. And one promise I'll make is that I'll be engaged. And even though we have differences in opinion, I will never turn a year away from anybody. I know you and I, Daniel, have had some difference of opinion in a lot of things. Me and Aaron Starr have had differences in quite a bit, probably more than you and I, Daniel. But we have to come together as a city and listen to everyone. We can't be apart and saying you're right and you're wrong, and not come to some middle ground where we can decide on how to accomplish all the things that the city needs. And so I ask the voters for their support for the 4th district. Just one more thing, make sure you go out to vote, make sure you fill out the census, and wear a mask, keep your distance, and wash your hands. And that's all I have, Daniel. And hopefully we can come back again and talk on other issues.
Yes, Jack, I do appreciate you taking this opportunity to meet with me. And as Jack mentioned, the census, the final date to submit your census is on September 30th, 2020. So please be sure to visit Census 2020 online to be able to submit your census. This is very, very important to get accurate numbers that will determine the amount of funding that each city and community is able to receive towards healthcare, education, infrastructure, public safety, and it also determines the number of representatives that we have in Congress. As Mr. Villa also mentioned, to be sure and vote. Please register to vote.ca.gov is online. It takes you nothing but 2 to 3 minutes to fill out the online application. And the deadline to do that by mail, post date marked, is October 19, 2020, and online as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jack Villa, a candidate for District 4 for the Oxnard City Council. Please be sure to visit his Facebook page at facebook.com/jvilla2020. There you can be able to find out more information. Jack, you have a website?
No, not yet, but you can go to Facebook under Jack Villa for City Council.
Sounds good. Ladies and gentlemen, please be sure to join us next week on September 24th as we have 2 interviews for mayor. We have Supervisor John Zaragoza at 4 p.m., who is running for mayor of the city of Oxnard, as well as 5 p.m. Planning Commission Chair Deidre Frank, who is also running for mayor of the city of Oxnard. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. Jack, once again, thank you for joining me in this conversation, and we will be sure to have you come back so we can continue these topics. This was a really
I will come back.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxnard Live, all live and 100% real. Thank you and have a good evening.